We're live. This is DC to Be Revolution. I am your host, Noah Volz, and this is where we think big to live large. Today, I have Dr. Damian Kristof. He is a naturopathic doctor, a chiropractor. He is doing so much in the world. Just a short list of everything that he's doing. He was the host of the TV show Downsize Me. He's also the co-host of the podcast The Wellness Guys, and he does some amazing seminars, including The Power of Food and Crack Your Stress Code. So Dr. Damian Kristof, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks, Noah. Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. And one thing I didn't mention is that you just launched a breakfast cereal of sorts, I think called Forager. Can you talk a little bit about how you got that opportunity to, kind of get into the product space?
Yeah, absolutely. It's when you mentioned I was a naturopathic doctor, I studied to be a nutritionist as well. So I'm a nutritionist and a naturopath and a chiro. And off the back of the nutrition thing, I did the TV show Downsize, which you did mention, and in New Zealand, that was where that show went to air. You can watch it in the States. It is available in the States on cable, and in fact, that shows 130 different countries around the world. But one of the things that people asked about that show was, what was the muesli that you made on that show? And so I had to create this muesli. So I'd created a muesli to assist people with managing cholesterol and heart disease and diabetes issues and all that sort of stuff. And essentially it's just raw nuts and seeds and gluten-free grains, without sugar, without baking, without any added flavors or stabilizers. It's basically a raw blend of nuts and seeds. And so I created this muesli, and it just worked so well. So I created a product around it called Forage, and now I have 4 different blends of things, including a porridge, a bircher muesli, a paleo muesli product, and then the standard muesli product. And we're about to bring up some new things, but it's been going now for 5 years. We're in 5 years in the marketplace over here in Australia. We're in New Zealand, we're in Australia, we're in Malaysia. We're not in the States yet. I'd love to get to the States, but I just don't know if we can manufacture enough for all the hungry mouths over in the United States. We'll have to see.
Yeah, congratulations. I mean, such a great opportunity, and I totally get that. I mean, it seems like what Australia has maybe similar number of people as the state of New York, or you probably know this better than I do, but feeding all the hungry mouths in the US would be quite a bit.
I think it's about the same number of people as Los Angeles. Like we're 26 million people is all we've got, or 26 million people. So the land size of Australia is the same size as the land mass of the United States, but we have the same quantity of people as just who live in Los Angeles, I think it is, or maybe it's just California. I'm not too sure, but I know that it's a very, very small fraction of your population, not even 1/10 of your population.
Oh, that's crazy. So one thing that you mentioned about the Forager cereal is that the TV show that you hosted, Downsize Me, kind of gave you that opportunity because people were interested, they were asking for it. So I'd love if you'd share how you got that opportunity and to do to be the host of that show.
Yeah, well, that's a really important thing, I think, Noah. It's really great for your audience because, your audience being mainly students, many people, when they are a student, behave like a student. And I never, in my professional studies career, I never behaved like a student. I did when I studied to be an accountant. So when I was studying to be an accountant, I played up lots, I drank heaps, I went out heaps and partied a lot and experimented with different types of herbs to expand my consciousness and did all those sorts of things, right? But I never, when I got into naturopathic college and when I studied nutrition, when I studied chiropractic school, I took it professionally. And so that meant that I also worked full time. So while I was studying, I worked full time, I consulted, and I know you mentioned before you're a massage therapist, and so that means that you've already got a work ethic. And so I managed to have a work ethic as well as a study ethic and a school ethic, and so I never really stopped working. So by the time I was out of college, I'd already been working in practice for 5 years, and everybody else was kind of just starting out. So I'd already made a lot of mistakes and had areas, but I already had a constant flow of patients. And off the back of working really hard, I just made more connections. And so eventually, with success in weight loss, I managed to pick up this TV show. It was just, at the end of the day, it was a lucky phone call. I happened to be on the end of the phone and got asked the right question. But it was about speaking at business network international groups of BNI, or some people have Toastmasters things. I made myself available to speak at those sorts of things, and I polished up my Talk the TikToks, or I polished up my, my 60-second, introductions. I used to go to these sorts of events just to try and work out how I could speak better as a professional speaker while I was a student, rather than actually waiting until I became a DC. That way, then I hit the ground running. So it's more about having, an effective work ethic while I was studying, rather than actually just landing on my feet, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And speaking of that effective work ethic, I mean, when I Googled you, I mean, you came up with so much stuff. I don't even know if you do these things anymore. You came up with Eat Fat, Be Lean, the 21-day Body Blitz program, the Paul Method portion design, like on and on and on. And so I was like, okay, this wasn't just like one phone call. This was you launching program after program after program after program. And so then, people were like, this guy is a go-getter.
Yeah, you have to test stuff in the water, and you've got to see what works and what doesn't. And so many people talk about their business failures, and that causes them to shy away. But for as much money and success I've had in business, I've equally had as much loss. I've lost a lot of money in business, but at the same time, I've made a lot of money in business and helped a lot of people out. So you have to try things on to see if it's going to work. Not every single time do you throw your fish in the water and the line gets bitten. You've just got to keep on dangling lines in, and eventually something gets taken. So, the PAR method for me is a portion design, I suppose, system that I designed off the back of reading a number of different books. And it works really well. So, it's something that I've been using now for about 15 years. It forms part of my talk called The Power of Food. And I did a bit of that Power of Food presentation at the Wave last year. And I think I spoke for 45 minutes or an hour, but that presentation generally goes for about 2 hours, and it can be a workshop for 8 hours. So you can really, get some amazing stuff out of it. But it's, I just try lots to see what works. And if something works, then I keep it going. If it doesn't work, it hasn't been a waste of time. I've learned something from it.
Yeah, completely. And in terms of, figuring out what works, as students, we're trying to figure out what works as chiropractic students, what technique, what this, what that. Do you have a system that you utilize to determine, is the thing that you're doing actually working and worth investing more time and energy into to expand it bigger?
No, that's a great question. And I think every chiropractor, for the duration of their whole chiropractic career, is looking to just refine something that they're doing, whether it's their technique, whether it's their language, whether it's their customer relations management tool, whether it's their note-taking, whether it's assessment techniques, whatever it is. Every single chiropractor is always looking to refine and improve. And so at this point in time, relatively early into my career, I've been 20 years in practice as a practitioner, 10 years as a chiropractor. I'm still looking, but at the moment I'm using Thompson as my analysis technique and Gonstead for my my lines for my x-rays. I adjust using a combination of Thompson, activator methods, Gonstead, and diversified. So, I've kind of got all of that. So I suppose it's the Kristof technique is what I'm using. I'm about to go and do some atlas orthogonal upper cervical investigation, because I'm really fascinated by, particularly after the Wave last year, and listening to, who was it, Scott
Rosa, yeah.
Rosa, yeah, gee, his stuff was amazing. And so looking at that, and I see a number of patients with multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and all those sorts of things over here. So I'm fascinated to see whether or not there's some kind of correlation. So I think I'll do a bit of that. I don't know whether I'll practice with it, but I don't think we ever stop learning and trying to refine. I think it's really important that you understand that your college degree, like, to get out there, it's just your ticket, and most of your learning is going to be done once you've graduated. You're not going to be a perfect chiropractor once you're finished. In fact, it's highly likely you'll be one of the worst chiropractors you've ever met until you've had a number of years under your belt.
Yeah, completely. I think that's so important to recognize that, the why of going to school is to get your degree. And that gives you the opportunity to help people in the way that is really authentic to you and really speaks to you. And that serves the type of people that you want to serve. And in terms of that, you've done such a great job, creating your own podcast. I think you've got a couple podcasts, and then even like a podcast platform where you also support other podcasters. Can you talk a little bit about how you came into that through your your career?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of your previous guests, Lawrence Tam, he and I met at an event that's very similar to what the Wave is in a part of Australia called Western Australia. It's the largest state in Australia, and so we met over there at a presentation that I was giving, and he came up to me and said, "Damian, I love what you're doing. Can we do some stuff together?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Can I just video you for my patients?" I said, "Sure." So we did a little video for his practice members, and that got broadcast out. And he said, maybe we should look at doing something to help other chiropractors implement wellness strategies into their practices. So it's not, just pie in the sky kind of thing. And at this stage, it was very early in James Chestnut's career. James Chestnut was coming out, and he was just launching some things. And I'd just come back from New Zealand, and I, had all these grand ideas of how we could actually do it. And so Lawrence and I started something up called Wellness 2.0. And Wellness 2.0 was essentially a DC campaign or a DC program that people could take to learn how to language wellness in their practice. So they could take all of what they learned from James Chestnut and then implement it into their practice. And so we were doing that. We had a great time, and then we realized that it wasn't really the DCs that the problem was at. It was at the consumer end. And so we thought, what we've got to do is we've got to get the message out to the consumer. So all of my bags of forage actually have the innate intelligence story on it. So all of my bags of muesli now have innate, like what I call NQ or innate intelligence. There's a story that runs right down the side of the bag that tells people about the innate healing ability of the body to heal, and that exists in living things. And so it talks about that. And then we felt that we needed to communicate innate intelligence, chiropractic, from a vitalistic viewpoint through, I suppose, a consumer-driven language. And so we decided to start this podcast up with another guy, Brett Hill. And Brett's a fabulous chiropractor. And at the time when we started, he was getting into the paleo movement. I'm very whole food, so I wasn't about paleo. And Lawrence at that point in time was more about mindset. And so we kind of just got it all going. And so it became then, I suppose, the Parker for patients is essentially what it was. It's an education tool for all patients around the world about a vitalistic lifestyle that's, I suppose, if you compare it to, say, mainstream medicine, it could be seen as alternative. But when you consider that chiropractic is the second most used health profession in the world other than mainstream medicine, then we're not alternative. We're just actually an incredibly valid healthcare system. And so we're only alternative to those people who think that there's only one way. So we just wanted to get that message out. So all of our podcasts reach consumers, and we're talking 2.5 million downloads a year. This is an Australian podcast. It's not something that's small. It's big in Australia. And essentially it's used to educate our patients. But we're talking about nutrition, and we're talking about mindset, we're talking about exercise, we'll talk about fluoridation, we'll talk about antibiotic use, we talk about everything. And we also talk about chiropractic. It's just that it's not a chiropractic per se podcast. It's a vitalistic podcast done by 3 chiropractors that weaves in a chiropractic philosophy through the education. It's fabulous. Anyway, so moving on from that, we did that. I talk a lot, don't I? Sorry, Noah. And so then we decided that there was a whole lot of other information out there. People started to approach us. How do you do it? How do you do it? We said, why don't you just send it to us, and then we'll just get it posted up. And so then we started this thing called the Wellness Couch. And so we now host 20 different podcasts on our network, and we'll grow. I think this year we'll end up hosting over 30 podcasts at the end of this year.
That's so brilliant. Actually, when I first started DC to be Revolution, I had a similar idea, like a similar concept to what you created, and it hasn't really taken off that way. But this idea that it could be a platform for, students who wanted to create this consumer content while they're in school to produce that content. And, you know, I would host all of that content for them because it's relatively complicated to, you know, launch your own podcast and all the automation and all of the, you know, logistics that go along with that. So, you know, I think it's so beautiful that you were able to do that and that you're so consumer focused. I think that's so important to get the chiropractic story out there, because even though it's the second most utilized healthcare system, they're still underutilized. And so, so, you know, I'm really grateful that you took the initiative to make that happen. Any advice that you have for students when, in terms of creating that consumer concept or content? I know that can be kind of daunting while you're in school, but you know, do you have like a kind of strategy or a way that you develop the content that you're going to produce?
It's ironic because we always thought that we needed to come prepared for a podcast, and the way in which a podcast seems to work best is in a conversation. So, you know, exactly what you and I are doing at the moment, Noah, is to have a conversation, ask some questions, have a bit of dialogue, and make it interesting. So when you listen to talkback radio, which essentially is what a podcast is, it's some form of talkback radio. It's just pre-recorded. It's really about having a conversation that's interesting. So a lot of people think that what's in their head is actually interesting. It's really the questions that are in your head that's more interesting, because you get to pull information out of other people. So provided the two people that are talking are engaged with each other and they find each other interesting, they can make a really interesting conversation. And then, of course, people will listen to it, and then people will share it. So there was a great podcast that came out from the United States. It was called Serial. And I think it was part of That American Life. And it went gangbusters because basically it told a story. It was really well put together and revolutionized the way in which podcasting was done. So up until then, it was all very, you know, get a microphone, do a Skype or a Google Hangout, and that's just kind of how you did it. And then This American Way, or This American Life, I think it is This American Life, it started bringing out beautifully produced, presented and I suppose cut up and spliced together almost shows that were called podcasts, and that is what people really want. They want something that sounds really good, that's really interesting, that tells a story that they can follow, and is relevant to their life at the time. So the one thing that I'd say is that most people couldn't care less about is what a subluxation is. And most people couldn't care less about innate intelligence, really, but they need to know what it is. It's that we just don't need to bang on about it. You know, I played golf yesterday with an orthopedic surgeon, and we were hitting around, and we're just chatting about how I'm a chiropractor and he's an orthopedic surgeon. And I said, so what are the sorts of things that you do with knees and hips and all that sort of thing? And he told me all these things. And I said, do you ever tell your patients that? He goes, nah, they don't need to know all that sort of thing. We just tell them we're going to fix their hip or we're going to fix their knee. That's all they want to know. They don't need to know the insides and outs. And it's the same as us. Like, we're going to find, locate, detect, and correct a subluxation. Well, that's all we've got to do. But when the patient comes to us, they want to know that they're going to feel better, or that this is going to be their outcome. You know, are they going to have a better expression of life? Are they going to, and how do we measure that? Are they going to have more energy, and how do we measure that? And do they have improved range of motion, or do they have decreased pain? Whatever we're measuring, that's kind of what they're interested in. They don't care about the nomenclature or the language that we actually use. It's keeping it patient and practice member focused and centric.
Yeah, beautifully put. I think that's so important for us to recognize that what we want to talk about, or what may be most interesting to us as chiropractors or healthcare providers, is not as interesting to the, you know, consumer or the practice member. So, you know, using our language in a way that speaks to them is so important, and you've been so successful with that, with your, you know, your TV show, with your podcast, with your presentations, with your workshops and your seminars and all of that. So if students or other chiropractors who are watching this want to get in touch with you, want to reach out, want to learn more about what you're doing and how to you know, how to follow in your footsteps, how can they get in touch?
Thanks, Noah. Look, the best way for people to get in touch with me is either via Facebook. I'm on Facebook a little bit, so you can find me on Facebook as Dr. Damian Kristof. That's DamianKristof. I'm sure you have this in the show notes. .com. Oh, yeah. Or was it Facebook? Whatever. Yeah. So facebook.com/that, or DamianKristof.com, which is just my website. So if they just go to those places, they can easily interact with me. You can find me on Instagram and all of that. But really, it's Facebook and my email that I tend to use the most.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you once again for being here, for offering, these just little nuggets of gold to get people thinking, asking the right questions, to start like looking at the bigger picture and the bigger impact that they can make as chiropractors. I think that's so important. And that is the essence of the DC to B revolution, and the essence of thinking big to live large. So if you were inspired by this show today, please subscribe to the channel, like us, comment below. And thank you once again, Dr. Damian Kristof.
Thanks so much, Noah.